Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. So I've been covering the banking stuff for quite some time now, especially a lot over the past couple of months with the initial collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, followed by all the others. And it is really, really heating up. Enough that, late last night, I texted Kirk Elliott, said, Kirk, please come on tomorrow morning. I'll clear my schedule. We need to do an emergency update because folks, it's really getting real. It truly is. So I've got a few articles to show you before we jump into the interview with Kirk, and then I have some information afterwards as well. But first off, this is just the big thing, and we're going to be talking about this with Kirk, but this is out Zero Hedge yesterday. It says the banking collapse of 2023 is now officially bigger than the banking collapse of 2008. And he says, yes, you read the headline correctly. Collectively, the three biggest banks that have collapsed in 2023 had more assets than all 25 banks that collapsed in 2008 did. So this is continuing. We're continuing to see this, even though Jerome Powell's out there saying that, hey, everything's fine. Jamie Dimon, don't worry, folks. I mean, if you remember earlier this year with Kirk, we did a show. We talked about that FDIC meeting. We have all these big bankers, these FDIC folks sitting around a table. And I think they didn't expect for parts of that video to go viral. But in that video, they're talking about how the system is going to collapse. And they're almost laughing at the fact that the people have more faith and confidence in the banking system than the bankers themselves. So they know it was going to collapse. What they're talking about in that particular meeting is what to do when it collapses and how to implement a bail-in, right? A bail-in meaning instead of a bailout where the government comes in, gives our taxpayer money to the banks to say, okay, hey, we're going to save you like 2008. A bail-in is where they're saying, okay, all the money that you've lended to the banks, we're going to seize part of it to help us keep the banks alive. Like that's what it is. They did it over in Cyprus. They took 10% of people's money. This is what they're really gearing up towards. But as we see the banking system absolutely imploding and the contagion is just picking up, and I think it's going to get much, much worse. And look, I'm not trying to be a fear monger. I'm just trying to be really, really sober with you. A year ago when I was warning about the collapse of the dollar and warning about the collapse of the banking system, I had so many people commenting and saying, it's not going to happen, fear monger, et cetera. But folks, that's here. But simultaneously, we also have some massive, massive news as it relates to the BRICS countries. So let me go and pull this article up for you. This is Zero Hedge. This is on Tuesday this week. 5 Arab states plus Iran among 19 nations ready to join BRICS. So Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Algeria, Egypt, Bahrain, and Iran have formally asked to join the BRICS group of nations as it prepares to hold its annual summit in South Africa. So again, our dollar value, it being the global reserve currency, is so tied to our relationship with Saudi Arabia and the agreement with them that basically that formed the petrodollar, right? We're going to protect use our military to protect you, look away from your crimes against humanity. But in exchange, you're going to force the world to buy and sell oil in the US dollar. Well, that is literally this is almost like the last nail in the coffin to do that, because you've got China and Russia and the other BRICS nations that are formally basically breaking apart. They're tired of living under the rule of the US dollar. So they're forming their own system. They're expected to officially announce their currency very soon, with a lot of people expect to be backed by gold and other commodities. So this is, again, another death blow. So it's almost like the U.S. banking system, the U.S. dollar, is being hit from all sides. That's the only way to describe it. And it is on its last leg. So folks, we're going to go and just jump right into this interview with Dr. Kirk Elliott. I hope that you enjoy this, and I hope it's some good information for you that leaves you a little more, rational and just logical and understanding where we're at this point in history. Kirk, it's great to have you back on as usual. And I thought, we had a show earlier this week and I thought that would have been it, but the whole system seems to be imploding. And I thought that, we have to have more of an emergency broadcast, because I feel like that things are accelerating a lot faster than even I expected. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, they're almost speeding along at a supernatural clip, actually. And earlier this week when the Fed announced another 25 basis point rate hike, right? Well, so did Europe.
Yeah, I saw
The
that.
European Central Bank raised a quarter of a point. But so here's the dilemma. It's like now the talk of all the policymakers at the Fed level, at central bank levels across the world are weighing in the balance. What's worse? What's the worst evil? Is it going to be raising interest rates when people are shackled with debt? Or is it going to be the inflationary pressures that impact everybody, even those not in debt, right? But in reality, they're both equally as bad. And this is the catch-22, right? They don't know what to do because they simply let it go too long, right? And a lot of this was manufactured because of the forced shutdowns during COVID, and which workers couldn't work. They amassed debt. Well, then when they had debt and they couldn't spend money because they were laid off or whatever, now they go to the government and say, we need money. We need all these benefits. We need unemployment benefits, right? So all this massive amount of government expenditures were just exploding, while at the same time, income tax revenues were coming down because people weren't working, while at the same time, unbeknownst to almost everybody, in March of 2020, the Fed did Regulation D, which changed the reserve requirement to zero at banks. So banks didn't have to have any money on hand at all, right? Now, they have a little bit, but this is why we're seeing the bank runs that we're seeing today. So it's not like these are just coming up out of the blue, right? It's not like this just happened. This has been a seed that was planted in March of 2020 when the Fed said, hey, banks, try to stimulate the economy, lend out almost everything you've got. You don't have to hold anything back, right? So now when big retailers are going out of business like Bed Bath & Beyond, and other retailers are seeing the writing on the wall and they're pulling money out of the system, and individuals are pulling money out of the system, out of their bank accounts, right? That's what I'm talking about. The banks don't have any capital on hand to give, and therefore they go under. See, the one general rule of thumb that we should always remember: why do banks go out of business? Because they run out of money, right? So here's the pickle with banks, and this is why this is such a big deal, because they have two things working against them. Number one, deposits are coming down. Actually, they have three things. I'm forgetting a big one. So number one, they have people pulling their deposits out, companies and individuals. Number two, they have the Fed pulling money out of the money supply to eliminate paper currency as they build up into a system of central bank digital currency. So you've got that. And then you've got this Regulation D, which means there's no money there at all. So when people are pulling money out, when retailers are pulling money out just to survive, they don't have the capital to withstand any kind of downturn in deposits. Well, now it's like boom, boom, boom. It's almost like lights out for the banking industry. And we're starting to see this cycle beginning. And I think that they've realized it's like, we really truly have a serious problem. And they don't know what to do, right? But they're going to say they know what to do because they're going to bring in central bank digital currency to try to save the day, which is not going to do anything.
And
right? Because the problem is,
I'll say one thing to add is
no.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is no deposits, and they're having to push all this money out as people are requesting them. So they have to go to the Fed for an interbank loan, which costs them money, and they don't have the money. So this is the vicious cycle that we're seeing.
Well, also, it seems like if you look at SVB, for instance, a lot of what triggered that collapse was that they had invested a lot of their assets into financial vehicles that once the Fed raised the rates a little bit more, they became a negative for them. And so, because back in the 80s, when it wasn't Volcker who raised the rates and actually it successfully combated inflation. Am I correct in my history with that? Right. But they were 100%, able to jack up the rates because banks still, were much more healthy as a banking, system at that point. They went ahead and lent out everything. And so now what's happening, it seems, is that as they're raising the rates, these banks, which have their assets sitting in these vehicles, treasury bonds, et cetera, if I understand correctly, that it's now making those become negative for them. And so it's crippling them. So they've taken all this money, they've put it into things that were giving a decent return, but now the whole thing is undoing. And so I want to bring up just to frame what's happening. So I'm going to bring up an article that was recently, this is from yesterday on Zero Hedge, how the banking collapse of 2023 is now officially bigger than the banking collapse of 2008. And I don't want to be a fearmonger. I really don't want to, and you and I always try to put a positive spin on things, and that's just how I live. Like I'm a very happy person, but like think back to 2008. The people that are watching and listening, think back to 2008. Think back to the news footage of the bankers, like whole banks being laid off, people walking out with their cardboard boxes of stuff. Think about how that affected the economy. Think about the stock market falling. That's where we're at, but this is much worse. And so I want to come down here. So there's a few things I'll read here. He starts off, says, yes, you read the headline correctly. Collectively, the three big banks that have collapsed in 2023 had more assets than all 25 banks that collapsed in 2008 did. And what's crazy is I'll scroll down here. They have this little graph showing the banks that collapsed and the assets. And so you can see 2008, there was the one big one of Washington Mutual, right? And there's a bunch of other small ones, but it's like we've just started this, right? We had SVB, Signature, First Republic. This seems like it's just the beginning. And he actually highlights that in the article. He says, unfortunately, the banking collapse of 2023 is far from over. He says, we still have 8 more months to go this year, and many more banks are currently teetering on the brink of disaster. Now, I'll go to another thing. So we also had Jerome Powell coming out yesterday, I think just straight lying through his teeth. I'll play this little clip. This is from his meeting, his press conference yesterday.
Before discussing today's meeting, let me comment briefly on recent developments in the banking sector. Conditions in that sector have broadly improved since early March, and the U.S. banking system is sound and resilient. We will continue to monitor conditions in the sector. We're committed to learning the right lessons from this episode, and will work to prevent events like these from happening again.
So Kirk, do you agree with Jerome Powell when he says the banking system is sound and resilient? I mean,
no, because that is what probably some press secretary someplace that these are the talking points, use these exact words. Why? Because Jamie Dimon, CEO of Chase, said about exactly the same thing. Right. So when First Republic went down on Sunday, right, it's happened on Sunday afternoon. What happened on Sunday night and Monday morning? Jamie Dimon, CEO of Chase, has numerous press releases because JP Morgan Chase bought that bank. Hook, line, and sinker, right? All the assets, all the debt, all the toxic debt, all the derivatives debt, everything, right? So, and already JP Morgan Chase had $50 trillion of derivatives debt already. Now they added all this other debt that there wasn't enough assets there. I mean, if First Republic had a bunch of assets and little debt, they wouldn't have gone out of business, right? So they got massive amounts of debt, very few assets. And so now, if I were a shareholder of JP Morgan Chase, it's like, what gives? Man, we just added a bunch more debt, right? But here, don't worry, everybody. Jamie Dimon to the rescue. So he said some very peculiar words. He mimicked Jerome Powell, saying that this is stabilizing to the system. And he said, we are for these community banks, these small community banks. However, it's good for America to have very few, very large banks. What did he just say with that? He basically said, we're in consolidation mode. Big banks are buying medium banks are buying small banks. All this other stuff is going to go away. And in doing this, he basically revealed that he has a God complex, right? Because he said, we are doing the work of God. and bailing out these banks. It's like, what? Wait a second. That's not the work of God. I know what the work of God is, right? This isn't it. Right. And then so then he said it's stabilizing. This is the work of God. They are in favor of small community banks. However, we need a very small number of big banks. So if you add all of this up, what does it look like? So Seth, imagine you're a shepherd, right? Imagine you're a shepherd and you've got thousands and thousands of sheep, and there's some sheep in the field that are drinking out of the river, some of them that are chasing butterflies, some that are just standing there, and some that are jumping off cliffs. And you say, I got to save all these sheep, right? But it's hard to corral thousands of sheep. See, what do they need to corral the sheep for? Because they need all the banks in cahoots, because they're bringing in a central bank digital currency that they need full adaptation with. So it's easy to corral 6 or 7 of the sheep rather than the thousands. So this is where the consolidation comes in. And this is why Jamie Dimon and Jerome Powell are kind of excited about this, right? Because there's consolidation, so they can easily come to what's next, right? But this is dangerous, because this bank that went under, First Republic, it wasn't small, right? Second largest bank failure in the history of America. It's the 14th largest bank in America right now, right? 14th largest. I mean, we're talking almost a top 10 bank just went under, right? And this is why they are so afraid of the contagion starting to spread again. They thought that they had corralled it. They thought that they fixed it after Silicon Valley, Signature Bank, Silvergate Bank, and then the spread that started to go over to Europe with UBS, Credit Suisse, Deutsche Bank, right? They thought they had it under control. They do not have it under control, as now there's even more regional bank failures that just kind of mushroom clouded almost overnight since Sunday. And I think this is just the beginning of a next wave of bank failures.
Well, and so what's crazy to look at this. So, obviously, you and I have been talking about this, saying, look, this is coming. The experts are saying, say Kramer's saying, oh, invest in these banks and everything's going to be fine. And everyone at that level is telling us it's all going to be fine. Maybe it's going to be a slight recession. But as we know, that eventually it gets to a point where even the people that normally want to kind of pacify us with, illusions and lies, they start admitting the truth. And so an article that just came out last night, which this is so significant. I'm going to pull this up. So this is on PBS, but a lot of different places covered it. And I can't say I like PBS, but either way. So White House economists warn of recession as debt ceiling fight drags on. So this isn't some third party person. This isn't, some, Peter Schiff or someone that's kind of, or Dr. Doom that's saying this. This is the White House economists, right? This just says, so White House economists on Wednesday warned of severe damage to the U.S. economy in the event of a debt default, which is kind of like it's damned if you do, damned if you don't, as we head towards this. But what they say here, this is where it's crazy. It says the White House analysts warned that a protracted default could send the stock market plummeting by 45% and cost more than 8 million jobs in the third quarter of 2023, raising the prospect of, quote, listen to this, an immediate sharp recession on the order of the Great Recession. So, when I had Charles Nenner on, who's a financial cycles guy, he said, it was almost like, it was interesting. He said all of his cycles are saying that fall of 2023, he's predicting a 40% drop in the stock market. Ed Dowd, big finance guy, I had him on. This is the beginning of the year. He said that all of his information is showing him 30 to 40% drop by the fall. We now have the White House coming out saying that we could see a 45% drop by the fall. I mean, to me, and if you look at that, combined with the fact that we have now eclipsed the 2008 bank failures, and it feels like it's just beginning. I mean, I really look, and like, I'm just trying to be very real with this. I'm trying to be very sober about this, but to me, I feel like that we're on the edge of a Great Depression. Like, that's the significance of, I think, that where we're at. I mean, I think that people are going to see 401ks wiped out, IRAs wiped out, the stock, wiped out. Like I've got family that had their whole their entire life savings in an IRA with Vanguard. It's like, if that loses 45%, if they're lucky, I mean, I just feel like that America, by the end of the year, and I hope I'm wrong, we're not going to recognize our country from what it was like at the beginning of the year. It's going to be that significant.
Yeah, I mean, sadly, I mean, even economists at the big news networks, right, that have been so pro-Biden, so hey, this spending is good, this infrastructure spending, all this stuff. Well, now the consensus is 67% we go into a recession this year. This is from the people that were the biggest cheerleaders for Biden's fake economic growth, right? They're now saying this isn't gonna work, right? But when you talk about the bank failures, right? So just since yesterday, these are the after hours numbers from a lot of big regional bank stocks. So PacWest down 60% overnight. Western Alliance down 30% overnight. Metropolitan Bank down 20% overnight. Valley National down 15%. Home Street down 11%. Zions Bank down 10%. KeyCorp down 8%. Citizens Financial down 5%. This is since the markets closed yesterday. They're not even open yet.
This is contagion. That's what that is, right?
This is the contagion that's spreading. This is after hours preliminary indications of what's happening. I mean, when all the sell orders are starting to come in, the markets haven't even opened. And this is what they are expecting in one night when the markets weren't even open, right? So as you look at what's going to be happening here, but okay, so that's just one night. But PacWest, they're down 70% in like 2 days, right? So as you start to look at this, it's like, oh my word, this is the beginning of the banking failures that the globalists are really kind of probably foaming at the mouth over, saying this is going to be really good, right? Because they want to usher in a new system. So what if their old system dies? In the financial world, if you want to give birth to something, you have to kill the thing that was there before. You can't have two coexist, right? So they're killing their old system to bring in the new one that's all about people control and digital money, right? So this system that we've known since the emergence of central banking in this world that goes way back beyond the Fed. I mean, literally, the Fed is just the United States version of central banking, but it was put together by the Rothschild family, right? Which goes back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years in Europe with central banking. The way that we know fiat-based money creation is not ending. Paper-based fiat money creation is ending, going towards a much more sinister version of it, which it's technically a lot of work to print $1 trillion worth of money. You have to make the paper, put it in the machine, put ink on it, it goes through, you cut it, you wrap it up, you send it to the banks. It's much easier to create that kind of money by sitting at a computer and hitting a bunch of zeros and hitting enter, and it's like, boom, I just created all this inflation, right? And with that, it's easier to create inflation, but B, it's easier to control people when you can cut them off by the switch of a button from buying or selling if you don't like them, because you don't like their politics, you don't like their religion, you don't like that their health passport doesn't match up with what you want, you don't like it that their social credit score isn't in line with what the globalist agenda is, right? And so then, I mean, this is the world that we're entering into. So we always have to realize, Seth, that these things that are happening are being propagated, built up and actually intensified by the same people that had the system before. It's a no-lose situation for them. It's a huge lose for us, which is why we need to wake up and realize what's happening, which I don't like, you don't like, to be the purveyors of bad news. I mean, good grief, I can't stand it sometimes, but we're not the creators of the bad news. We're just telling people about it so you can adapt and you can act on that and you can thrive by reallocating to something different. But here's the thing about banks. I don't know which is the next one that's going to fall. We don't know if your bank is the next one that's going to fall. I mean, you're looking at this list. Okay, it looks like, yeah, PacWest is probably going to be it, right? But it could be Western Alliance. It could be Zions Bank. It could be any of them, right? So here's where getting out of the path of the hurricane, getting out of something that's not real into something that is real, I think is going to be the mechanism where people can thrive moving forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Well, Kirk, thank you so much for coming on. I texted you late last night. I said, hey, can you come on for an emergency update? Because I just feel like that everything that we've been talking about is really, it's happening. And this is a really significant time in history. And like I said before, I think that we're going to look back at the end of this year and barely recognize what's happened to this country. Unfortunately, it's where all the people with all the control want to take things. So I think that you're doing a great service just coming on here and just helping people to understand what's coming next, how to prepare. So Kirk, again, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. So folks, I wanted to talk a little more with you about what I see happening. And it's interesting because during the end of my conversation with Kirk, I remembered this recurring dream that I had. I've probably had this dream over a dozen times, and it's always the same type of dream. And what the dream is that I'm out at the house I grew up in out in the country, and I look to the horizon, and there's this massive tornado coming. And it's probably, it's like an F5. I mean, the tornado looks like it's 5 miles wide, and the sky is black over there, and there's lightning. It's like the most ominous looking scene, like something out of a Stephen King movie. And I'm seeing this tornado just slowly coming towards the house. And at my house where I'm living at that time, everyone's out, they're barbecuing, they're playing in the yard, playing, croquet or whatever it is they're doing. And I'm warning everyone, I'm saying, look, folks, everyone, we have to get to the basement. We have to get to the basement. And I'm trying, but people are just so busy. They're playing, cornhole, or they're barbecuing. And I'm trying to tell everyone, please, we have to get to the basement. And so in some of the dreams, I'm able to get most of the people to the basement. The tornado passes and we all survive, but there's other dreams where that doesn't happen. And I don't know why. I mean, it's literally the one recurring dream I've had my entire life. And so when I look at what's happening now, and this isn't just about the banking system, right? But we'll use that as part of the discussion. When I look at just what's happening in the banking system, I feel like that's where we are. That's like what Kirk said at the very end there is like, there's a hurricane coming. So there's a tornado coming, and we've been tracking it. We're seeing it. It's on the horizon. You see it by now. Like if you're watching the show, you see it by now. But all the people around us, it's like they don't see it. Like the wind is picking up, and there's all the signs are there, but they're just not looking at. They're not looking in that direction. They're saying, "Oh, it's just a nice summer breeze, or it's just a summer thunderstorm." And you're saying, "Oh, look, this is really, really serious." And so, look, I remember back in 2008. At that time, I was working for the Epoch Times back in New York, and I remember, living in New York City, working for the media. Covering, it was like front page news every day for weeks. Stock market crashing, lost another 300 points today. I mean, it was a historic time, but it changed everything. I mean, that was just limited to the housing market, that crash, and that the ripple effect of that. And we saw mass layoffs. People lost a lot of money. It was a significant crisis. And so with where things are at right now, it's like, I feel like that we're on the verge, we're on the edge of something much, much worse than what happened in 2008. And even the White House economists are coming out and saying it. And look, the White House obviously spews all kinds of crap, lies, propaganda, etc. But I think at a certain point, they have to start talking and giving information that's in line with reality, because then it'll become way too obvious that they're lying. Like the video we play of Jerome Powell out there saying that the banking system is stable, the guy's lying through his teeth. I mean, I think that within a couple of days, that speech will probably see 2 or 3 more banks collapse. And so, but one of the big questions that people ask was like, okay, great, this is really helpful, but what do we do? Right. And actually, I'm going to pull up, there's a Telegram comment. Let me find it for you folks really quickly that I just read, that I want to actually kind of go over this, because this is this is a good point. The person that made this comment, they said, we're being herded into an inescapable trap, but what exactly can we do to stop our financial enslavement? Buy gold? Dandy. But that doesn't stop this monstrous system that will eventually trap you and everyone. Telegram is alive with warnings, but what is the solution short of revolution? How can we stop being the elite's playthings? How do we recover the United States of America from the enemy infiltrators now posing as our leaders? I'm listening. And it's a great comment. And that's what this gets us to, is like, what do we do? What do we do? Because it's like, okay, it's easy to say, okay, go buy gold and silver. Okay, well, I can't eat gold and silver. I can't, it's like, is that really the solution? And of course I talk about that. I'll talk a little more about that, but like, what is the solution? And so I want to share with you kind of just how I've framed this in my mind and how I'm approaching solutions with this. So basically what I see happening is that we are experiencing the kind of the real first couple of stages of a controlled demolition of our banking system and a lot of other systems that will fall with it, because it underpins everything, like so many other things around the world. And so, as I've talked about with, say, Martin Armstrong or other people that are cycles folks, the social engineers, the parasites, the elite class parasites, they know this is coming. They know the dollar has a life cycle. They know that everything is coming to an end, that all the cycles are converging. And so what they're doing, though, is they're trying to control it. So they've framed this as the Great Reset, which is really what it is I believe it's them just trying to seize control amidst the collapse of this old system. But one thing that we have to be really cognizant of is that no one has control of a collapse except God, right? No human has control of a collapse. They can try to control it. They can try, but that's the nature of a collapse. A collapse is full of chaos. It's so difficult to control. And also what you have then is what I believe is these two giant factions. So you have the European banking faction, right? The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the bloodlines. You're familiar with all those folks, probably. So they're trying to force us into this European-based central banking digital currency, right? And they've been using the United States as their weapon, using our military-industrial complex. But what you have also is you have this BRICS alliance, right? So you have China, Russia, other places that are seeing the writing on the wall. And not that I'm saying I trust China or the CCP, because I don't. I trust them far less than even our own government, which is already very corrupt. But they're also at the same time, it's like you had the building that's falling in the West, and the globalists and the European banks are trying to control that demolition, yet they've got an enemy that's also trying to screw up all their plans at controlling the collapse of that other system. And so it's introducing even more chaos as we're seeing the BRICS efforts to completely collapse the dollar, as we're seeing everything they're doing, even saying, look, we're going to forgive countries if they have debt in the US dollars, we're going to bring them into our system. So you've got this system that's being attacked from all angles. And so the question is, what do we do? And my perspective is that we become resilient. Right. Number one, I think what do? We get right with God, right? And you can take that however you want to take it. But for me, that's like my number one priority is get right with God, get my faith in place, right? That's the foundation. But beyond that, I'm not going to sit there and pray in a room, all day and hope that, the world doesn't fall on me. But the other thing though is that we have to just become resilient. We have to look at, our food supply, as I've talked about a lot, food supply, energy, generators, building a community, right? Because I think that with all this collapse happening around us, I think that it's going to collapse and neither of the two systems are going to be in control anymore. I think that the European bankers are going to lose control. The BRICS conglomerate, they're going to lose control. So neither are going to have complete control. And that's where the opportunity lies, because that's where the opportunity is for us to come forward and build something. And that's what we're already doing. We're building parallel systems, parallel bartering systems. We're building parallel communities, because if all that collapses and you can say, well, look, I know my local farmer, I know my neighbors, I'm well armed, I'm going to trade, with my neighbor here, we've got food stored. Whatever it is, we're building a system that I think that can be resilient. I think that's actually God's plan, is to build a system that we can be resilient with. And so that's why I talk a lot about, it's prepping is almost a bad word, because prepping in time, implies like building a bunker and hiding in the doomsday prepper. It's like, no, we have to build community. We have to build resilience, become more self-sufficient, get ourselves off of the government's teat. If you're living in like a big blue city, maybe you can't move right now for whatever reason. Say you're living in an apartment somewhere in a big city. Find some people, go to a local meetup, find a local patriot meetup, and find folks that live out in the country. Start building these relationships, because I think that though this is a frightening time, I think we're going to see something very beautiful emerge from it, similar to what happened after 9/11, right? Even though 9/11 was completely an inside job, as I just recently had Richard Gage on talking about that. But after 9/11, you saw our country united in ways that we hadn't seen in quite some time. And so I think that what's going to happen amidst all this is all of the falsehoods, all this transgender stuff, and all the woke agenda. It's all going to collapse. It's like what Cliff Highs talked about. It's all going to collapse once they can no longer fund it with their fiat dollar, and that allows us to come back together. And I think there's going to be this massive resurgence of people that are coming together to build something, and that gives me a lot of hope. That gives me a lot of hope. Now, one thing I told you I would touch upon gold and silver, and so I want to bring up an article. This is from Kitco. This is just interesting. So amidst all this happening, yesterday, gold set a record, right? So gold hit a record high of $2,085 per ounce before, this is before it closed a little bit slightly lower. But gold and silver both, you're seeing this is what happens when there's blood in the streets. Precious metals go up because a lot of folks are leaving this system. They're leaving, they're pulling their money out of the bank. They're going into precious metals, because throughout history, there's been rise and fall of empires, collapse of currencies. Precious metals, God put precious metals on earth. Man put the dollar, man put the Federal Reserve. God put gold and silver on earth. I really believe that. I really believe that gold and silver are God's money. I believe that they are the true currencies that humans should transact with. And so if you're someone that you're watching this and you're thinking, okay, gosh, if the stock market goes down 45% by fall, you might have almost your entire life savings sitting somewhere, whether it's an IRA, whether it's in the stock market, where you could see that get cut in half. Look, the government has already taken out so much from us, from taxes and all the crap they've done. To see that further get cut in half, and you're thinking, okay, what can I do? Look, I'm not a financial advisor, so again, do your own research. But to me, and this is just my honest advice, I'm not recommending Bitcoin. I don't understand Bitcoin. I don't trust Bitcoin. That's just my thing. Maybe you do. Good for you. But for me, it's food, seeds, land. We bought an extra couple of acres near our house for more growing potential. It's the core items. It's ammunition, right? That's a great thing. But beyond that, it's just precious metals. It's gold and silver. I don't know what's going to happen, but to me, that's the safe haven that I can see. That is the financial safe haven that I'm looking at, saying, okay, even if everything else completely crumbles around me, I've still got this. And it's the international market, the international demand that gives gold and silver its value. And so even if things really kind of go kaput in the United States, well, you have these BRICS nations backing their currencies with gold and silver, potentially. And there's just all kinds of global demand for it. Not to mention that we've seen that when there is a collapse in the markets, collapse in the banking system, you always see after a period that gold and silver completely skyrocket. And so that's what's safe for me. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, okay, what are the solutions, especially as it relates to finance, which is this whole thing, I would honestly say it's gold and silver. Now, look, if you have someone that you already work with that you trust, great. Maybe it's Andy Schechtman, maybe it's other folks that you're familiar with, fantastic. But if you don't, if it's your first time or you haven't bought in a while, this is why I love working with Kirk Elliott, because he comes on the shows with me, right? That's one of the things I love about Kirk. He comes on, you see him, you know him. And I've talked to a lot of his company, the people that he has working with him, they're like extensions of him. He starts every day. I've been on their meetings before. Every day they start with prayer. They talk about what's going on in the world biblically. That's the kind of company that he runs. And so if you're interested, if you want to set up a free consultation with Kirk and his team, all you do is one of two things. One is you go to the website. So goldwithseth.com. You scroll down to the bottom. You'll see there's a form that pops up right there. So that's one thing. You fill out the form, but your email, your name, phone number, some basic information. That's step one. Or what you can also do, just give them a call. The phone number is 720-605-3900. Again, 720-605-3900 or goldwithseth.com. I'll put both of those in the description to the show as well. But what you do is you reach out to their team. They contact you. They set up an appointment. It might be a couple of weeks out. You just kind of, I know it's tough, but you just got to have a little bit of patience because everyone is moving into gold and silver right now. There's a reason. So, and again, even though it feels like you're late to the game, you're early compared to the rest of the country. So they're going to set up a phone call where what they're going to do is they don't just want to like have you call in, like, okay, we'll sell you a bunch of stuff, right? They want to have one of their advisors that really understands precious metals in the markets talk to you. Say you've got a 401k, say you've got an IRA. They've got really creative ways of allowing you to move your assets into gold and silver without paying the government a bunch of money. So look, I hope that that's a potential solution for you. It's what I'm personally doing. So I would never recommend to you something that I wouldn't personally do or something that I wouldn't recommend my own mother even to do. So look, like I've got Heaven's Harvest food. I've got, seeds, I've got ammunition. These are the exact things that I'm doing. And look, maybe you've got someone else that you like their advice better. Good, great. Get advice from 10 different people and then figure out what feels right for you. But this is what feels right for me. And this is what I feel just safe in recommending to you. So folks, thank you so much for joining us today for this emergency broadcast. I'm going to have a couple more shows coming out this weekend. And we will see you then. So take care and God bless.